Checkmate. I win again.
Hello, and welcome to the show. Mystery Go and the Feral Monk coming at you with a new episode. Today we're going to be talking about thought. And I thought right off the bat that we would kind of give you a little bit of insight and, catch up any new viewers or listeners out there. Let them know what we're about and what we're doing here. And first thing that comes to mind is a recent little cast or stream that was on YouTube that I saw with the Strokes following the release of their new album, The New Abnormal. And they're titled Five Guys Talking About Things That They Know Nothing About. And so this is kind of like along those lines. I'm not trying to rip off Jules and the Boys, but this is kind of, a couple guys talking about things that they think they know something about, definitely want to approach this from that very humble place because, I love to say all I know is that I don't know. And once I kind of start off with that foundation, it helps me, in all aspects of my life. So this is, I believe, the 7th episode, and we have talked about such intriguing topics such as time and perception, mythology, and what am I missing, Mr. Monk? What else did we talk about?
Philosophy.
Philosophy.
We stumbled through that one a little bit.
Yeah. Sometimes we do that, and that's okay. But a thought. I think I'm going to hand this one off now to you, Mr. Monk, and let you get us started off on thought and what direction we kind of want to go when we approach this one.
Yeah. Once again, it's a very big topic, very broad topic. I think we've had a good tendency until now that we're trying at least to bring these very big ideas into something somewhat straightforward. With topics like philosophy and mythology and time, these kinds of things, you can really get lost for a while and enjoy talking about all the fine details of each one of those topics or subjects. I think from the point of perception until now, excuse me, I think that it's taking a very interesting direction. I think we're mostly here to talk about the human experience, what all is entailed in that, what are some of the mechanisms of that, how those experiences can color one's perception and thinking and cause a wide variety of pleasure and pain as a result of that. And so I think, asking ourselves what is perception and getting to the point where we could see in that process of cognition, you have the contact of the five senses with some type of stimulus, or it's the mental stimulus. And then that causes some type of sensation, either a mental sensation or a physical sensation. And off of that sensation, there's the perception of that going on. And we talked about how perception can either be colored or it can be unfiltered. And but say, for the sake of our conversation and continuing it, say that perception is colored. Whenever it's colored, it's usually colored in the very basic or in the beginning sense with mythologies. And those mythologies tend to emerge out of those cultures through heroic personalities or special personalities from within that culture that were able to help transform that group or tribe or nation or whatever into something more than it was previously. And those mythologies then tend to take on redaction and a little bit of editing over time, and they get refined and become impregnated with even further symbolic importance. And then at some point, teachers emerge trying to explain how these different mythological developments can be executed as a philosophy on how to live life. And so, even though we stumbled through philosophy, that's basically what we're talking about. We're talking about lived mythologies or lived religious experiences. And all of that together is something that's akin to like the idea of conditioning. And that conditioning itself then, becomes the topic of what we're here to talk about today, which is thought, right? So
Yeah.
we've got a nice line going through those podcasts, and I also enjoy that they're thinking out loud, that they sometimes that they stutter, or that they're a little bit slow, or what I do regret though are the moments where it would have been nice to jump on something, but it passes because the conversation is moving too fast, like you were saying before we started. And so I think it's appropriate to take that perspective as we approach our topic now, that being thinking. And so thinking, as we talked about, is basically this conditioning, this stored memory of experiences. And in that process that we were talking about through perception and these different things, the storage of experiences, memory in the mind, in that whole situation, there have been various pleasures and pains and various degrees of each one of those. And the mind itself has developed a habit of problem solving, how to get as much pleasure as it can and to avoid as much pain as it can. And so that informs sort of like the impetus or the main like focus of thinking. And that kind of splits off into two different things. Kind of splits off into a procedural type of thinking where it's utilitarian, it's about doing math, it's about knowing how to feed yourself and take care of yourself, or to work a particular skill at a job, or to be able to speak a language and express yourself. And all of these types of things are the procedural side of thinking. And in that, there's not really, at least there's not any like earth shattering problems. You might have some difficulties or something with language, or some difficulties with articulation, or whatever. But then there's the other side of our thinking, which tends to center itself around a self, and that self is a story, and that story is all of that conditioning coming alive and happening to somebody. And so thought is kind of like revolving the other half of the time around the self. It's pleasures and pains, it's desires, it's aversions, it's cravings, it's addictions, it's benedictions, it's so thinking is really involved around that, and this procedural and self-centered type of thinking.
How does that relate to like intentional thinking or unintentional thinking?
Yeah, I think you could add that to it. You could actually add that dynamic to it. You would then have sort of a conscious or a unconscious procedural thinking, and a conscious or an unconscious self-centered thinking. Obviously, I would tend to think that the conscious version of those things are probably going to be the most healthy. I think the having to leave all of your life over to the autopilot of just, brain calculated conditioning. I think that's kind of tends to get us in trouble because it tends to make us reactionary. So we tend to live out of a sort of a reactive mode where, as you were talking about earlier, whenever something comes up in the news or in our lives, before we even take the time to consider it, we just jump straight on the reaction. We already feel a certain way about it.
Yeah. Just built up, experiences and memories and just events that have shaped and molded us, and we can let all of that kind of get the better of us if we attach ourselves to that identity somewhat, right?
Yeah, and if we let it go on autopilot,
Yeah.
if we just let the conditioning do all the reacting and we're not conscious, it's an unconscious or an unintentional, there's maybe no guilt or anything like that attached to it, but it's still not very effective or positive or helpful or
Right.
it's still a destructive thing. Whether the person is then, if you're able to judge the person for that or not, is another matter. How strong is the conditioning? How wrapped up are they in the conditioning? How much do they just react and go on the autopilot of those unconscious thought patterns? And how much do they actually grab the reins? In India, they had the classic, it's just an absolute classic image, is the chariot driver and the horses. And so I think there's 5 horses, each for the 5 senses, and the chariot is the body, and the chariot driver is the soul. And so the horses themselves, even though they're the body, they're the body mind. And the mind, the brain part of the mind is in that equation. And so it's like taking your hands on the reins or just taking them off.
Yeah.
There's no telling what kind of wild crashing adventure could happen from taking the hands off the reins, if the horses are going to stay relatively well on the road or if they're going to want to go off into pasture, if you're going to flip your cart doing that or whatever. And
So,
yeah,
go ahead.
So I was just saying then, what we're coming to basically are those, what is the problem with thinking? And I think all of the problems with thinking tend to revolve in that self-centered area, and they tend to be unconscious conditioning left to just run on and be reactionary. And there's not a lot of like conscious overseeing of the of that process going on, which is often described as presence or as being here in the moment or whatever. But that's what it basically means, is like really consciously taking the reins of your mind. And
but I'm gonna throw the monkey wrench up in there.
Hell yeah.
And because we were mentioning how it's you have the intentional and the unintentional thoughts, right? And so to look at that even from a different kind of angle, Muji sticks in my mind when he's talking about intention creates tension. And I think I understand what he's talking about with that, but I think that can be very misconstrued as well. So I wanted to maybe investigate that a little bit more and see what you have to say about it. But like, from what I understand, we mentioned also self-serving, self-servingness, kind of like that can be, kind of part of the whole feedback loop.
And that's definitely where like the conflict comes in. There's that self-centered thought is self-preserving thought. It is self-fulfilling thought, self-serving thought. Its entire focus is on its pleasure, getting away from its pain, replicating those experiences as much as possible.
Yeah. And like, and kind of taking it on that other tip, like intention, like, you know, like people talk about all the time, creating intention, you know, like creating the right intention. And, you know, like, you know, I'm going to create this intention. You know, it's almost like a New Year's resolution. I'm going to create this intention that I'm going to be more kind to myself, take better care of myself, or something like that. And so Muji's like gets frustrated with that. He's like, why create that intention? Why not just do it? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that's what I hear him on that level. You know, why? Because you're basically admitting by saying you're creating this intention that you're not that, you know?
Yeah,
That,
definitely.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
and so you can bring in the whole like manifestation of thought, and like the laws of attraction are somewhat into it. And I think that ties in with the whole self-serving, you know, ness of it. And so you have to be careful with, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, like I think you make a great point that, you know, you have to be conscious, you know, you can't go on autopilot, but you also have to be aware um, um, of basically, I don't know, you have to pick me up on that one.
Yeah, it's tough to describe. You know, you want to be aware of all of these things going on, and that awareness itself is something deeper because it's not actually caught up in all of that. I don't know if it's jumping though too fast um, to that, because you know,
Okay.
as we were talking before, I think, you know, all of us um, need uh, a certain level of understanding of the conflicts and things that are going on inside of us, and we also need sort of practical techniques uh, that can help us. And it doesn't mean that it's, you know, it's gonna cure anything or heal anything. It's not like some type of, like, you know, meditation and stuff like that. It's not like a medicine or a medical intervention or anything like that. It's just a,
Yeah.
you know,
No one's stopping.
if you are capable, of like looking um and being somewhat passive and receptive and just looking at your own self, then you can do that exercise, and it can be very useful, especially in these types of like stressful situations, or in moments where our thinking is our experience of our thoughts is that it is somehow attacking us and uh, berating us with like a barrage of like insults, and then at the same time compliments, and you know, it's like a narcissistic love partner that we have inside of our head, you know, who oftentimes is not the best partner in a relationship. And
And not to, you know, try to make light of narcissistic partners, because I know that someone was married to one.
yeah, I have a good friend who barely got out of one, and now she's blossomed like, you know, like you wouldn't believe. It's, yeah, no, definitely not making light of that, of those
No, I
very
know. No, you're
seriousness
not.
of those things.
Yes, exactly. I think that, you know, we just want to reiterate that this is such some of these topics are very delicate, and we're trying to be as sensitive as we can to them. And
While remaining, you know, really truthful about what, you know,
absolutely.
what needs to be talked about, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, so, you know, basically, like we were talking about, we've got this, you know, we've got this problem, We've got this problem with thinking whenever it goes awry, whenever the conditioning is working on autopilot, whenever that conditioning is informed with selfish tendencies, with aggressive tendencies or ambitious tendencies or whatever. And then that thinking can then becomes almost like different personalities. It's almost like thought becomes different personalities. One of the personalities is the fake you, is the is the story you. One of them though is a judge, that's constantly judging everything that you do, and it's telling you about it. That wasn't good enough, and this wasn't that, and this wasn't that. And one part of it is the mirror on the wall, that's always telling you that you're the most beautiful of all. And there's the thinking apparatus, the mind, whatever that instrument is, that speaking AI operating system, that's part of this biological body mind, is creating all these different personalities and things inside the mind, and it's steering your actions with it. And whenever that is an unconscious process, it shouldn't be surprising, that you run into some walls, that you crash a few times, that that things don't always go very well. And
things aren't always going to go well.
No, they're not. And like we're talking about, there's definitely a need to have sort of like a bag of tools.
Yeah.
That you can get skillful at using.
Noticing them. That was one of the first things that I worked on in therapy. Was just simply kind of noticing. Just letting them have their space, not try to beat yourself up over having them, and just not feed into them as well. Just kind of taking that observant role. But yeah, because those negative and toxic thoughts can just become that feedback loop, and then you're just caught up in that existence. It's no fun to be in that.
Yeah, it's an absolute momentum. It's like a momentum, and by fighting against them or by going with them, you're just allowing that momentum to continue. And so what you're talking about is kind of like sort of like stepping out for a moment out of that momentum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the ability to sort of create that little bit of detached distance. It's not to live in detached distance.
Creating
it's creating it for a second for the purpose of understanding. It's not creating it as like a technique to then be like that all the time. It's meant for insight. It's gaining that little bit of distance so that you can become aware of all those processes at play, that whole theater at play.
Chess game.
Yeah.
That we play.
Yeah.
In our mind. Yeah, one of my favorite Sufi poets, the only one I guess I know of, is Rumi. And it's funny, I'm bringing it back to Julian Casablancas again. But I've been reading Rumi for a while, and I've been listening to the Strokes for a while. But recently, in the past couple of years, was reminded of a great quote by Rumi, and Julian Casablancas and the Voids used it, and at the beginning of their song, "Human Sadness," beginning of their music video. Just check that out; it's pretty cool. But the quote is, "Beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there."
Yeah. And that place is the same place that Muji's talking about. That place is the same place, that many great teachers, I don't want to name too many people and get people upset or anything like that, but that's what a lot of people have spoken of. And the beginning of that is being able to gain that slight bit of detachment, so that you can see this whole thinking conditioning process going on, and realize that you're that which is aware of it, not that thing itself. And like that little beginning is like a chance to step into that field where Rumi wants to meet you. And the difficulty, because it's actually something quite simple, but it's difficult. And the reason that it's difficult is that it's very easy to miss it, because that thought created self that's full of all those stories and things, that is the thinker, that is the assumed I, that is the doer of actions, that is the liver of this life, this ghost story of yourself that the mind has created as an image, and that you've invested your identity into that image. That oh no, that's yeah, I lost my train of thought on that one.
And basically, you're
Just
saying,
remind me exactly right where we were for just a second ago, because I got distracted.
yeah, identity and self-image.
Yeah. Well, so in the course of thinking, that self-image then begins to do all of the action. It begins to do all of the acting and the feeling and the responding and the reacting and the experiencing. And so whenever you're trying to go into find out and find that detached space, that field, a lot of times its last trick is that it's still pretending to be the ultimate seeing or the ultimate self. It's still
It doesn't want to go away.
yeah, and so the most important thing is to always not remind yourself in a mental way, but try to remain conscious, learn to settle into even that I'm aware of it, no matter what it is that comes up, no matter what if it's a thought, no matter if it's a stumble or a fumble like a few seconds ago, just stay there. Just stay. And
It's good advice. Absolutely. Also want to kind of segue into, I believe, the next episode. We're going to be discussing values, and we're going to be joined by Christopher Troy White from Catawba, North Carolina, recent resident of there. He's from Michigan, up in near Midland, but moved down to Greensboro when the monk and I were in high school, and threw some hellacious parties back in the day. Chris and Willie's were infamous. But anyway, I think that's going to be a great conversation, and it's going to tie in well with thought, because we can, I think, like you were talking about, some of the useful tools that we can use to help shape our thoughts is kind of by aligning them with our values. And once you kind of set a nice defined list of values, then you can kind of differentiate what thoughts and even what actions are heading towards that goal, those goals, or not serving you maybe so well. So I really look forward to that. I know he's going to have some really, really good insight. He's doing some really fantastic work right now, and definitely stay tuned and check us out next week when we come to you with that topic. I think I'm pretty good on that one, Mr. Monk. What have you got to add and sign off on?
I don't really have much to add at all. It was as always, it's really nice to like talk these things over. Even if we do it more often than we can podcast it, I also still enjoy having private conversations and not everything just being online.
Totally.
But yeah, just really enjoyed it, and look forward to talking with Chris again, and talking about values. I think it is just a natural continuation of where we've been going with these conversations.
Yeah, completely. We have not planned out any of this. I think you mentioned, before we started today, I think we started this venture about a month ago, and we had no idea what we were really going to talk about. You can go back and watch the pilot and see how clueless that we were. And we may still seem pretty clueless, but it's starting to take a little bit of shape, and but we like keeping it abstract.
Yeah, I mean, we've basically made a video and a beat for each podcast right before the podcast, trying to hide it with some Easter eggs, some little symbols and little things here and there. And yeah, it's been an extremely fun start of a hopefully long journey.
Yeah, it's lit that figurative fire under my butt, and caused me to be more creative. And I like that sense of deadline and urgency to a degree. Working kind of with limitations, I think spawns a unique form of creativity and authenticity that Ready Made embraces. So it feels right. Also, I did a snippet this week. So Ready Made's got a new snippet out on YouTube. Check that out too, with Carla R.
Yeah, it's great. It's absolutely great.
Thanks again for joining me, Mr. Monk, and everyone for listening out there. Take care of yourselves. Be well. See you soon.